it's really appropriate that we talk about an issue, and the issue of that is that of the relationship between scientists and non-scientists. And so our next panel will explore the critical issue of trust in science. And our moderator today is Jenny Luray, our own Research America's Vice President for Strategy and Communications. And joining Jenny on the panel is Elizabeth Christopherson, who's President and CEO of the Rita Allen Foundation, Andrea Isabel Lopez, Civic Science Fellow with CienciaPR, Puerto Rico, Dr. Maria Newhardt, who's Community Outreach Program Director at Oklahoma University Health Sciences Center and Post-Doctoral Fellow at Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation. Dr. Rita Tuckson is the co-founder of Black Coalition Against COVID, and I might say an Emeritus Research America board member. And not listed, but we're pleased to have with us is Jedediah Isler, who is Principal Assistant Director for the Science and Society at the Office of Science and Technology, or OSTP, at the White House. So Jenny, we're looking forward to the next many minutes with you in the panel.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for that terrific introduction. For the next 50 minutes, with this visionary, and I really feel this way, visionary group of panelists, we're going to explore three questions. First, why has there been a decrease in the public's trust in scientists, despite science delivering the COVID vaccine? Two, is building trust the right goal? If not, what relationship between the scientific community and non-scientists should we be striving to build? And what are the barriers to building that? And then three, specifically, how do we break down those barriers? Our panelists have some really terrific examples that they've been working on and lessons learned that I know you're going to learn a lot from. So let me just do some quick stage setting here based on our survey data. Scientists in general and medical scientists still remain among the most trusted professionals. And I think that's important to recognize. It's not as if the trust has plummeted. However, there's some very disturbing signs and definitely an erosion over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our Research America poll found a drop of 12 points between 21 and 22 in those who had confidence scientists will act in their best interest. And a Pew survey found that those without a college degree and Republican voters had even less confidence in scientists to act in their interests. And both of those surveys have been posted for your reference. So with that stage set, what's going on here? I mean, we clearly do have an issue. How do we explain this dip when scientists were coming up with something that saved millions and millions of lives? Reid, let's start with you.
Well, thank you. I think that just to get the conversation started, it's the context that we are working in. There is obviously a multiplicity of different and pernicious agendas, goals, and belief systems in the land. And unfortunately, many of those belief systems, agendas, and goals do not place human survival or the welfare of the common good as an inherent priority. What we're seeing is an unprecedented and well-orchestrated misinformation campaign that uses very sophisticated, advanced algorithmic tactics that exploit fear. And there is an incredible amount of energy in stoking and stimulating fear, using and responding to people who are uncertain. We're living in a very uncertain and rapidly changing world. There's also fear stroked by past harms, or the perception of past harms. And then finally, what we're seeing is a major distrust of elites across the land. People are living in a state of perpetual victimhood. Somebody is out to get me. Those people over there who are not in my tribe are trying to do harm to me. And I would just then bring in that the people who are very involved in that part of the are oftentimes poorly educated in the science. They don't understand the concepts or the technology involved because of the suboptimal investment in education. And then we have celebrity obsessed culture, where relatively undereducated influencers have an extraordinarily disproportionate impact on the society. So I'll just sort of leave that as a broad landscape, what's going on, and see what my colleagues have more specific things to say.
Well, Reed, you've certainly given us a lot to chew on. Let me turn it over to Elizabeth. You have been working on the issue of the relationship between scientists and non-scientists long before COVID. So I'm interested in your perspective as well.
Indeed, and thank you, Reed, for setting that up, and Jenny for a lot of thoughtful work. I'm really delighted to be here among these panelists to kind of tackle this. I might highlight a couple things, because in addition to describing the landscape, Reed, I think we're also have an opportunity to share more and think more intentionally on how we bridge those divides, and that we're all, in a sense, actors in needing to do so, and needing to understand how we, and it begins with things that Andrea will talk about, being more culturally relevant. It begins with listening with humility. It begins with many other aspects of how we think about this. But when we think about, and you talked about science and context, it also reminds me just basically of Mary Woolley talking about science and context and thinking Research America, understanding very much that scientists alone won't be able to solve the very complex problems before us, and won't be able to bridge the divides just by themselves, that we're going to have to create new coalitions, new approaches, and new partnerships together to this. I think it was also, you credit Rita Allen, but we're doing this in a network of folks to kind of help think about our current context, the ecology for science too. And we're also reminded that last February, for example, you had Dr. Neil Lane here, gave him an advocacy award, and he started talking about the role and need for scientists to be more civically engaged. Well, we're going and amplifying beyond that with what Research America is doing with microgrants, for example, and what we're seeing the administration and others thinking about more participatory voices. So all of this is part of thinking about that science is making great progress, but that we need to change culture, and we need to broaden the benefits, and we need to focus on some of the work that we need to do, how and with whom.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And you mentioned Neil Lane. He is often credited with coining the term civic science when he actually worked in the same office that Jadida works in when he served as director of OSTP. So I think that prompts me to turn to you, Jadida. How do you see this issue of trust? How do you explain it? And let's start talking about whether or not that's the right goal. Is trust what we should be striving for? Or are there other goals that we should be striving for? Other types of relationships that we want to see?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jenny, for the question, and really honored to be in the company of such esteemed colleagues. I think it's a great question, and of course, you know, the answer is both, right? We definitely need to strive towards trust, and the Biden-Harris administration has very definitely leaned towards that direction, to Elizabeth's point about participatory science and collaboration, open innovation, to the work we do on COVID-19, et cetera, also scientific integrity and research security. So broadly speaking, we definitely agree that having more trust, building trust in science, broadly defined, benefits all of America. You can see that in any number of initiatives. I point right now to the Indigenous Traditional Ecological Knowledge work that has come out of OSTP's climate and energy team, because it is specifically designed to highlight different knowledge bases and how the relationship between how science is produced, how material is shared, and what is valued in conversation actually does substantively change and often improve outcomes for communities and also for policy making. So certainly trust is of critical importance. And I think, you know, we have to recognize that trust is complicated. It is easily broken. It's hard to build. And so I think over the last few years, you've seen this administration working incredibly hard, and specifically at OSTP, us working hard at restoring trust in science as part of restoring trust in government. We've done that both through some of the work that I shared on open innovation. Dr. Nelson recently gave some pretty inspiring, I'm biased, but some inspiring remarks on the need for collaboration with communities, not only in terms of citizen science and those kinds of projects, but also community-driven research, where communities are leading the charge, which also helps to build trust and also helps us come out with better innovation over time that's localized and specialized for the folks in the context. So certainly trust is important, and it's not just a want to have, it truly is a need to have. And it's something we're committed to not only fostering, but maintaining and trying to support and shore up as much as possible. So I'll stop there. I want to make sure my colleagues also have a chance to comment, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Jadida. Well, Andrea, you're working in some very culturally relevant ways with Ciencia Puerto Rico. Can you talk about your work there and how you are working to build trust with the various communities in Puerto Rico? And by the way, we know you are not in Puerto Rico right now. And as we said earlier during our check-in, we wish that your family and friends will continue to stay safe who are on the island. So tell us what you're doing with your work at CienciaPR.
Sure, definitely. Thank you so much for the warm comments. I would like to take a quick minute to highlight the current situation that Puerto Rico is going to with Hurricane Fiona. And if people feel so inclined and are able to, I would like to signal you to follow Ciencia Puerto Rico through our social media and our webpage, where we will be posting information of organizations where you can donate your money to that are working on the recovery of the island. Please don't donate to the government or organizations that are affiliated with the government. There's a loaded history there of them basically pocketing the money. The list that we have created is very much vetted based on prior experience and some of those relationships that we have built through the years. For those of you who might not be familiar, Ciencia Puerto Rico is a nonprofit organization that's composed of scientists, professionals, students, and citizens who are committed to the advancement of science in Puerto Rico. And the organization has different programming areas that are focused on science, education, and communication. And I have been working more on the communication side of things. One of the projects that I have been working on and evaluating is a partnership with El Nuevo Día, which is the newspaper of record in Puerto Rico. And Ciencia Puerto Rico established a collaboration with them in the early 2000s to publish culturally relevant science stories that were written by members of the Ciencia Puerto Rico network, which is over 15,000 STEM professionals or people who are interested in science and in Puerto Rico. So the goal of this collaboration was to increase the coverage of science in mainstream media, but to also communicate science in culturally relevant ways. There has always been a lack of contextualized and culturally relevant science information in traditional media. And English is also the language of science inside and outside of academia, which is not what we speak in Puerto Rico. We are a Spanish-speaking island. So this partnership has sought to address this gap and basically make science more accessible. To summarize the findings of the evaluation, it has been very clear that having Puerto Rican STEM professionals write about science to a Puerto Rican audience has been a massive success. There are a lot more culturally relevant elements in the articles that we have published. They are much more likely to be authored by STEM professionals, more likely focus Puerto Rico or Puerto Ricans or things that are going on in Puerto Rico. And then it's also important to highlight that this is the first analysis of culturally relevant science content in mainstream Puerto Rican media. So we hope that the findings help contextualize the importance and the value of supporting this kind of work. And also that the success of this partnership can serve as an example of initiatives that can be replicated in other contexts with different communities, with different groups to communicate science in culturally responsive ways.
Thank you, Andrea. I know we're going to drill down a little further in your project, but that was just a terrific overview. Maria, tell us about what you're doing in Oklahoma City. Your acronym is OPEN. share with us what you're doing just broadly, because I have some specific questions that I'm going to ask you later, but what are you doing broadly? What is your approach to addressing this issue of trust and breaking down barriers between scientists and non-scientists?
Yeah, so just to add to what has been said, I think our approach, so OPEN is the organization I started, the Oklahoma Policy Engagement Network, and we purposely didn't put science in the name because we know that that can have like specific connotations for certain people where they might think, just, I don't know, Breaking Bad or whatever other idea they have of what science is, but science is so broad. And so we wanted to be inclusive in that way. But our approach is really to build relationships, which then build trust. And so, the way we approach the community outreach work we're doing is to focus more on just truly connecting with the community in the sense that, we don't really need the public to understand science or understand what we do, but the public does need to know who we are, the big we, and what we're about. And so I think relationship building in a very direct and tangible way is the way we're approaching the erosion of trust here in Oklahoma, where I think a lot of the issues that came up through COVID were just finally kind of coming to light, but were things that were kind of happening for a long time, and so it just culminated in this unfortunately big way. And so, being in Oklahoma, I noticed that there was a lot of shock when, as an Oklahoman, you're forced to do small talk wherever you're at. It doesn't matter. It's a requirement. And so as I just started kind of for fun telling people that I was a scientist and seeing their reactions and seeing that a lot of them were very shocked. And then they would have very immediate but interesting questions or like, I heard this, is this true? And so I would just take a moment on my day to just have a conversation with them, even if it was my hairstylist. We had a talk about animal rights and all that. And so a lot of the interactions I had that way showed me that there was a large disconnect between the science community and the community at large. And I saw how that it wasn't helping anything for sure, but it could, by building that relationship back up between the community and the science community, that we could maybe help in a foundational way of, if there's that relationship, then maybe when there's something online that they see about animal research, then I actually talked to someone and there's a little bit more about this. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the approach that we're doing. So we're working to connect experts and transfer evidence-based knowledge to our local leaders, policymakers, to try to increase and promote the evidence-based making in Oklahoma. And then the other focus of our organization is addressing the erosion of trust in expert opinion in Oklahoma.
Thank you, Maria. Well, we're going to come back to you because I want you to talk about your Ask Us Anything event and also perhaps what you're planning in rattlesnake country later in the year. Okay. But we'll come back to that in a minute. I was really struck yesterday during the forum when the NSF director, Dr. Nathan, was asked about trust in scientists. And he said, trust isn't gained, it's earned. And I think that's really what we're talking about. What are the avenues for scientists to earn that trust? And one of those is clearly through public engagement or civic science. Many of us have heard this term, many of us may be working in this space, but Elizabeth, perhaps you could just do a little table setting. how do you define civic science? This is something you've been writing about and working on for quite some time.
We have been thinking about this and working on this at the essential, I think, intersection of science and our civic life. I also think that, as with many other things, that definitions evolve, and so we do think that it's important to be creating a network of thought partners to help evolve. But essentially, I think part of our work has been informed, as I said, not only as we're talking about Dr. Neil Lane, Research America, participatory science, civic science, but really thinking about a very broad network of interconnected efforts to, again, change the culture. I think we want to change the culture and broaden the benefits of science. And that also, another thought partner involved in this is Peter Levine at Tufts, who has written about this and he approaches it from the side of civics, which he also talks about as being difficult to define or sometimes to find agreement. But he asks a question that I think is very relevant here, which he says, what is it that we should do? And he says the question ends with do, because he says civic life requires acting, that changing or preserving things in the world not just forms opinions about them. And he also talks about and underlining the word should. And the question signifies that civic perspectives is an ethical one. In other words, we have values and choices, and we're a society that needs to that we need to develop those trusted relationships. We think that change happens at the speed of trust, if you will, but we need to change these and develop new approaches, as I said before. And the subject of we, he talks about a real identifiable group to which one can belong. I also think that we have seen our we as being too siloed, as not crossing enough sectors and boundaries, as being not inclusive enough, as certainly not diverse enough. And so we need to lean into that question, I think, in a number of ways. And later on, I can share with you a little bit more how pleased we are to especially be leaning into the early career folks who have an opportunity, I think, and give them a space and support that learning to help with more innovative ways to, I think, address some of the incredible cracks, I think, in our society with polarization and others that aren't allowing us to really address some of the complex issues and benefits from scientific progress.
Elizabeth, I'm really glad you used the word belonging, because I think that's part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to enable more Americans, because we are talking about America right now, but this is a global issue, but more Americans to feel that they belong in some way, right, in science. A key challenge is communication, right? A key barrier to feeling like you're belonging. And Andrea, you touched on this in terms of your newspaper analysis. Is the language that I'm seeing and hearing, is that reflecting my experience? So let's talk about the creative ways you've all approached this issue of communication, science communication, as it were. And Reid, let's start with you. Let's talk about, the goal of the Black Coalition Against COVID, and communication has really been at its center. Can you talk a little bit about how you've used communication to get through your messages, and also how did you use communication to confront the horrible legacy of Tuskegee?
Well, very quickly, so the Black Coalition Against COVID is a grassroots community-based activity in Washington, D.C., formed on Easter Sunday, 2020, just as we saw just the magnitude of what this will be, this pandemic would be. And I was a former health commissioner in Washington, D.C. during the height of the AIDS epidemic, which taught me you have to have a grassroots effort to marry with governments top down. And so that's what we did. But as we were early on realizing that a vaccine was going to be so important, and that we knew the hurdles of vaccine clinical trials and participation by the minority community, we gathered together all of the leadership of Black medicine, all 4 of our academic medical centers, Howard, Meharry, Morehouse, and Drew, along with the National Medical Association and our National Black Nurses Association, pulling all of that firepower together. And the one message that we communicated right off the bat was we said, we love you. We created a video. You can go get that. Go to Google and put in your search engine, a love letter to Black America. And you will get that, and you might like it, but it's definitely what we started out saying, we love you. And the reason for that being so important to this question you ask about, whether or not we're trying to gain trust or something different than that, there has to be a common respect for life, a sense of a common civilizing value that says that we respect other people, we respect each other, and we respect our shared destiny. And that all of that is the science world lives with the community in this civic society that Elizabeth spoke so well about. So what we really did was to ingratiate ourselves, saying we are not away from the community, we are part of the community, we are you. And that we have to really learn now to know that there are elements that are available for us together collectively to move our people forward, to save our own lives. And so that's what we did. I would just quickly add, you mentioned about the Tuskegee experience. We got so frustrated with that being the rate limiting step when I was health commissioner during the AIDS epidemic. That was the biggest hurdle to overcome. And now 40 years later, the realization, the painful realization, the combined collaborative medical science, research, clinical medicine, and policy worlds has done nothing in 40 years to take Tuskegee off the table. Shame on us. And so we really now realize that we took the descendants of Tuskegee, who were all vaccinated, and we put them on film, and we sent that film around. And what they said very clearly and succinctly is, dear Black America, our parents and grandparents died or suffered unnecessarily because they were denied access to the treatment that would have saved their lives. It makes no sense to dishonor their pain and suffering legacy, to deny yourselves a drug that would prevent you from dying. It's not only illogical, it's immoral to use our parents and their suffering to justify your misguided efforts. I would say one other thing very quickly while I have it on this question of whether the goal is trust or not, Jenny, and that is that we've got to step back another step and work on a common sense of respect for life. There has to be a sense that we actually, that it matters, major matters to us that 1 million plus people have died from a disease where almost 3/4 of those people did not need to die. That is a fundamental issue that has to be addressed. And secondly, we've got to do better, and we can talk maybe hopefully in time about it later, a common sense of wonder and awe at created life that strokes our curiosity and our imagination. This mRNA vaccine is a miracle. How exciting it is that people could come together and use new talents and new technologies to produce it, as opposed to, oh my God, they're trying to do something pernicious and mean to destroy me. We've got to get back to a sense of wonder and awe. And that means we have really got to fight hard for the secondary science school education system in our country.
Reed, really stirring and important words. And, before and during the initial launch of the COVID vaccine, members of the Black community were among the most hesitant. But over time, and thanks to you and your colleagues, and many folks around the country, the Black community did accept the vaccine. And we worked hard to make sure access wasn't an issue. But I think you really did help to change hearts and minds.
Jenny, let's be really clear. Let's be really clear that the Black community ran a race with an anvil on its back and broken down combat boots and had to race against Leave It to Beaver with a new tracksuit. And we caught him and we tied him. And for the first time in modern history, the Black community erased a disparity, a major disparity on the backs of hard work and our work. And we didn't get a lot of support from around the country. And we didn't get a lot of support, at least initially, from the government. We did it ourselves, the Black community. I am so proud of what we achieved.
Well, you said that a lot better than I could, but really incredible work. So let's talk a little bit more about communication. And Maria, I'd like you to talk about your Ask Us Anything event. I found it really interesting that when you first approached the faculty at OU to participate, there was some nervousness.
Mhm.
Could you share that, and then how the experience evolved during that event?
Yeah. So this was our first event to directly try to address the distrust. And one of the things that's important for what we value and think it's important for our work is to not have an agenda, and to not have individuals feels like there's strings attached, like we want to interact with them because X, Y, and Z. But more of just, we are part of this community, and like Reed beautifully said, we need to work on rekindling that wonder and awe that science touched us all here in different ways, right? This is why we dedicate our life to this. So we know the power of that, and we need to just find a way to reconnect people with that, so that they feel familiar with science and they therefore aren't afraid of it. And so this Ask Us Anything, I did make the faculty very uncomfortable because we did not structure this event at all. We did not advertise we had 3 physicians and 3 PhDs, and we wanted people to meet human to human first, and then as they got to talk, they could talk about their jobs, their careers, their professions, but they needed to meet as people first. So we didn't advertise at all. We asked the faculty to come in t-shirts and just outside, gardening, or, things that you would just spend the day outside wearing. Nothing like overly professional. And we didn't give them any talking points. We didn't even prepare them with questions. We just said, just talk. And if you find yourself, you know science, what to say. But if you do find yourself, if someone asks a very important question that you want help, just flag one of us down. We had students there to facilitate, medical and graduate students there to facilitate the talk. We had 3 STEM tables for children to come and interact with and families to interact with. And so that was very, very uncomfortable for at least the feedback that I got from some of the faculty of, what are we supposed to say and what are we supposed to do? And it was just like, just meet people, just meet them. And so that was our approach to the event, and it went wonderfully. We were thinking, a lot of us are scientists, so we might not be the most social people all the time. So we were very much dreading going out and saying, come in, please talk to us. But that wasn't the case at all. As soon as people saw and interacted with us, we were constant, kind of like going for the 2 hours without stop. And I saw a family with it was a Black family with an infant child. They were able to sit down with one of the MD PhDs that we had that was a pediatrician, and they spoke for 2 hours. And so these kind of, it might not have been, all the people in the area or whatever, but the interactions that did happen were genuine and person to person, which is what we wanted to do. So those people could leave saying, I met a scientist today, I met a physician today, and we talked and we hung out and I ate my lunch next to them. And that's what our focus was for that event.
Thank you, Maria. Jadida, your team is also working to provide opportunities for citizens to learn how to use scientific methods to address issues in their own community. Some people call this citizen science. Could you share more about this effort and how you think it impacts how the public views science and the issue of trust in science?
Yeah, those are great questions, and I'm glad that you queued me up for that, because otherwise I was just going to piggyback off of Elizabeth, because she was making some really good comments as it relates to civic science. So to answer the question specifically, number one, OSTP is tasked by Congress to release a biennial report on the implementation of prizes, crowdsourcing, and citizen science. We do that every 2 years. We just released the last one in May of this year, and we are already hard at work on the second one. This report is mammoth. The last one was over 900 pages, which is exciting because it catalogs all of the activities across the federal government that include agency use of prize authority, challenge authority, crowdsourcing, and citizen science. All of those were set along with legislation back in 2010 and then reauthorized in 2017. So already the fact that there is so much paper on this, it indicates how agencies have really committed to the use of what we call broadly open innovation in order to engage with communities, engage with individuals, and engage with organizations to identify solutions to pressing problems both within the government and beyond. So that's the sort of like baseline thing that we do. I'm super excited about it because the report that we just released has more examples in it than any previous report. So agencies are learning more and more how to use these tools and these authorities to really support community engagement. So that's number one. But number two, and I think we've heard this in a number of the comments from my colleagues, the way that we engage communities is often context specific, it's issue specific, and it really depends on how the community wants to be engaged. So things like citizen science, what we call citizen science, we know that there's a better terminology for that. I'm using it not because it's the best terminology, but because legislatively that's where the authority comes. But we have tools like that where a scientist may set up a question and then call to the community to help answer a particular kind of question. But go all the way to the other end of the agency spectrum. And now I'm not using agency as in federal agencies, I'm using agency in the sense of autonomy with community-based participatory research, where communities are setting research agendas. They are identifying the questions that they want to answer, and then marshaling federal resources in some cases, and there are all kinds of resources available, including, Jenny, the one that you mentioned that Research America is doing through microgrants, right? So, figuring out what a community is interested in, whether that's an individual or organization or a community region, and meeting them where they are, right? So I think that's one of the things that we're proud about working with through Science and Society, and I'm happy to talk about how the division got named Science and Society and why that's important at this particular time. But just to stick on this thread about community engaged research and participatory science, the piece that we're pushing for as we move forward, and it's wholly in line with this administration priorities, is to make sure that all of America can participate in, benefit from, and contribute to science and technology. So we love prizes, we love challenges. They're fantastic and they spur innovation. If we're speaking about COVID-19, the Department of Defense, if I'm getting it correctly, used a challenge to rapidly innovate on ventilators early in the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So it is incredibly important that we use these tools and partner with the deep innovation that's across the country in order to surface these examples. And in addition, if we want to build trust, if we want to affirm the respect of humanity and the genius that lives in this country and beyond, uniformly distributed, it's everywhere in the world, if we want to respect that, then we do have to ask the question, what is it that's important to you? The example that Dr. Nelson used when we partnered with the General Services Administration on a recent event towards this end was, who better knows about the lake around you and what it needs, where the issues are, what the power needs are in an emergency to keep with what we've got going on right now in the world. Like, communities know best what they need. And when we treat them with respect, then we get a better answer. That's not just a feel-good thing. Like, data shows that. And when you have more diverse groups coming together, even in science, not just in business, that you get better and more innovative outcomes. So I could speak all day about this. Again, going to defer so that my colleagues have a chance to speak, but I will just say participatory science, broadly defined, is incredibly important, not just to sort of feeling good and making people feel important, but also driving innovation in a way that supports the nation at large.
It's a real change in paradigm too, right? In terms of how science has traditionally been conducted. Wow, we have hit on a lot of incredible topics, and we've got about 9 more minutes. So I've got 2 more questions, and then I see we actually have some questions from our audience that I want to get to. Elizabeth, I asked you why philanthropy is so important to civic science, and in the interest of speed, I'm going to quote you back, but then I want to ask both Andrea and Maria, who are benefiting from 2 programs that you are supporting, how it is impacting their work in public engagement. So you said that philanthropy is really about incubating and innovating. And you also said that there's a lot of focus on problem solving, but an underinvestment in the leadership needed to solve these problems. And I think both of these programs that you funded, the Civic Science Fellows Program, which Andrea is participating in, and the Early Career Microgrant Program, which we run at Research America with your support, do both of these things. So Andrea, could you talk briefly about how participation in the Civic Science Fellows Program has influenced your work?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So the Civic Science Fellow Program has had a direct impact in my work and basically what I want to continue to do in the long run. I have a background in public health and community health, so the focus of my work has always been around Latinx community, centering community voices and experiences. So I was at a point, I had recently finished my master's degree, and I was at a point where I was seeing what was working and not working in previous projects that I have been involved with, and trying to outline or figure out what next steps were going to be. And that's basically where the Civic Science Fellowship Program has been amazing, because it has helped me outline and has allowed me the time and space to look at a lot of the questions I had right now, which were basically like, what can we do to facilitate community engagement? What are the gaps? What materials or toolkits or things can we develop to facilitate this? And this is where, in addition to the analysis, the communication analysis, which has proved that science communication can be one of those gaps, and the value of supporting it. The other project that I've been working on is a reflexivity workbook to help researchers practice reflexivity. And just to summarize, reflexivity is a process where you're making like this active effort to be self-aware and reflect on your identities and positionalities, and the identities and positionalities of anyone who might influence or impact your work or be impacted by your work, which is a big component of what did Ida mention, community-based participatory research. And that's basically where I learned it from and where I've been, and in the context in which I have implemented it. But it's also very useful and in different contexts. So in science communication and community engagement. So this fellowship has allowed me the opportunity to translate what's very common in my training as a public health professional to different audiences. So yeah, in summary, and also I've been exposed to the group of fellows, which is just a massive learning experience, because we're all targeting civic science from different perspectives. So it's good to know what everyone else is doing and learning from each other.
Thank you, Andrea. Maria, we are really running short. We will be posting a lot of information about the microgrant program. We just completed receiving applications, got tons, and are very excited to see what new projects have been submitted by early career scientists. But perhaps you could just make a comment in terms of how did receiving the award, and the microgrants are small, $2,000 to $4,000, but how did it change the way your work was viewed on campus?
Yeah, so it made all the difference. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that I probably wouldn't be here today, not only because of the connections, but because of just it was the catalyst to everything that I've been able to do. And so in 2019, when I was going into my 4th year, and really taking a step back on what I wanted to do, I started having conversations with just scientists and mentors at different, whether they were trainee hangouts or whatever, to talk about my concern that of this disconnect between the community and the science we do. A lot of the responses I got were, that sounds nice, but or like important, or if you're passionate about that, that can be your work, but we are scientists and we're at the bench. So I was unable to kind of express why I thought that this should be part of our job. We should consider this part of our job, and that didn't really gain any traction. And so fast forward to 2020, I saw this grant. I decided, I saw what was happening, and I just wanted to try to do something to help. And so I applied, got it. It started everything. And so as I began the organization and my team began putting these events on, I suddenly got contacted by faculty saying, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for this important work. And so there was a really big shift in the way this kind of work was perceived. Before, it was kind of like, well, that could be your focus if that's what you want to do. But now I'm seeing a lot more, even at the faculty level, saying, please put me down as a volunteer. I really would like to get engaged. And even as I was reaching out and starting to try to plan these events, the fact that I could say, hey, I have a grant, just gave it legitimacy, because here, as we've touched on, and I'll wrap it up, as we touched on, we need to shift our perspective or our definition of outreach. We need to understand that recruitment is innately different than outreach and engagement. And we kind of treat them all one and the same, where a lot of what we do in the community is what can we teach them? How can we get them to want to be doctors? But really, we've learned that for science, for the good of science, we need everyone. We need our photographers, our business owners to have a respect and an understanding of science. And so we really need to not just focus on trying to grow our workforce, which is very important, but also growing the admiration and respect for science and everyone, because we are public servants and we need everyone to understand what we're doing. And so the microgrant has really made all the difference, because a lot of the pushback I got was, but how does this help us fill our labs or fill our, grant money? And not that those are bad concerns, but getting the point through that this is urgent, because there's climate change tells us there's more pandemics coming, and we really need to address the lack of connection between science and our public as urgently as we needed to, because it is a very big thing. So I'm incredibly grateful for just everything that this grant has allowed me to do here in Oklahoma.
Well, thank you, Maria. I'm petitioning my colleagues to see if we can get a few more minutes. But while I'm waiting on that, Maria, you're talking about how, we will continue to have major public health challenges. And Reed, I wanted to give you a minute just to mention the new initiative that you're embarking on, which is very related to this topic, looking at myth and disinformation, and how it's impacting trust, particularly in healthcare and in public health.
I'll be very quick. First of all, the premise, of course, is that trust leads to mistrust and to misinformation. Misinformation fuels distrust, and it's a cycle. Every single health organization in this country should come together now, whether you are basic science, applied science, biopharma, whether you are hospital systems, medical systems, whether you're ethicists, whatever your role is in the health ecosystem, the one thing that you can assume with a surety that your mission statement is all about ethics, professional values, your sense of responsibility for respect for the dignity of every person, and your values are very much grounded in truth, transparency, and honesty. And so all of those are the values that inform our professional lives, and thereby we bring with those into our industry. And so we are, with Mary Woolley and many other well-meaning and smart people, are trying to launch, and we have just launched the ship. Hopefully it'll sail broadly and smartly to get every single player across the entire health ecosystem to say to the American people, we hear you, we got it, we understand your anxieties and your concern, and we accept our accountabilities to treat every person with dignity and respect, and to always be purveying honest, trustworthy communication and dialogue with you based on science and evidence. And so, yes, wish us luck. It's a bold venture, but when you have someone like Mary Woolley being a part of the leadership team, who knows what you can accomplish.
Truer words were never spoken, Reed. And that goes for you as well. Well, we've gotten some really great questions, and we're just not going to have time to answer them, but you can see them on the chat. You know, how do we train scientists to be better communicators? How do we normalize this kind of training? How do we validate past harms, like Tuskegee and other examples of medical racism and misogyny? What's the role of gaps in our K through 12 education? And is this a uniquely US phenomenon? So incredibly timely, complex, but really consequential discussion today. I want to thank our panel. You are a wonderful and visionary group of people, and you've really showed us how you are working to break down those barriers and to build connections in diverse communities. And I got a text from one of my colleagues that this is one of the most optimistic presentations she has seen on this topic. So I think with all of you and all of the folks that you're working with, I think we can really get there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.